On my 70th birthday, my daughter-in-law raised a toast. To the old lady going to the nursing home. Soon she'll be just a memory. The whole family laughed. On Monday, I liquidated my $8 million estate and left for a cruise. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought turning 70 would feel like this. Not like a celebration, but like a funeral, where I was still alive to witness. My own eulogy. The restaurant was beautiful, I'll give them that. My son Michael had reserved a private room at La Maison, the upscale French place downtown. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the white linen tablecloths. A birthday cake with delicate sugar flowers waited on a side table. Everything looked perfect. I should have known better. I'd spent the afternoon getting ready, putting on my favorite navy blue dress, the one my late husband Thomas had always loved. "You look regal in that color, Vi," he used to say. I wore the pearl necklace he'd given me on our 40th anniversary and styled my silver hair in soft waves. I wanted to look my best. After all, 70 was a milestone. When I arrived, Michael kissed my cheek, his expensive cologne almost overwhelming. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, but his eyes were already darting around the room, checking his phone. My grandson Tyler, 16 and permanently attached to his smartphone, mumbled a greeting without looking up. But it was Yara, my daughter-in-law, who commanded the room in her red designer dress and glittering jewelry. She air-kissed me, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Viola, darling, you made it," she said, as if I might have forgotten my own birthday dinner. For years, I'd tried to love Yara as a daughter. When Michael first brought her home 15 years ago, I embraced her with open arms. I taught her my family recipes, shared stories about Thomas, welcomed her into our traditions. I even gave them the down payment for their house as a wedding present. But nothing was ever enough for Yara. The dinner progressed with superficial conversation. Michael talked about his promotion, Yara about her latest charity committee position, Tyler about needing a new car. No one asked about my life, my weekly painting class, or the community garden I'd helped start. Then came the champagne toast. Yara stood, glass raised, all eyes on her. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice carrying across the room. "To Viola, on her 70th birthday." I smiled, touched by what I thought was a genuine moment. "To the old lady who'll soon be in a nursing home," she continued, her smile never wavering. "Soon you'll just be a memory to us all." The room erupted in laughter. Michael chuckled, shaking his head as if his wife had made the cleverest joke. Tyler snickered, looking up from his phone for the first time that evening. Even the waiter, standing by the wall, had to suppress a smile. I sat frozen, champagne glass halfway to my lips. The words hung in the air like poison. "Come on, Viola. It's just a joke," Yara said, noticing my expression. "Don't be so sensitive. We all know how independent you are." The way she said independent made it sound like a disease. I forced a smile and raised my glass, taking a small sip. The champagne tasted bitter. "Speech, Mom," Michael called out. "Your turn for a toast." I stood slowly, my legs feeling suddenly weak. What could I say? That their cruelty had finally broken through the armor I'd built over years of subtle put-downs and dismissals. That in that moment, I realized none of them truly saw me as a person with feelings, dreams, and dignity. "Thank you all for coming," I said instead, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's a blessing to reach 70 surrounded by family." The lie tasted worse than the champagne. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I smiled when appropriate, ate cake I couldn't taste, and opened presents I knew were hastily purchased by Michael's assistant. All I could hear was Yara's toast repeating in my head, and the laughter that followed. When Michael dropped me off at my house, The beautiful colonial I'd shared with Thomas for 40 years, paid off by his life insurance when he died. He kissed my cheek again. "Great dinner, Mom. See you at Sunday lunch?" I nodded automatically. Sunday lunch, where I would cook for everyone while Yara criticized my decor, and Michael checked his emails. Once inside, I locked the door and let the tears come. I cried for the first time since Thomas's funeral 5 years ago. Not delicate, dignified tears, but painful sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the years I'd spent trying to please a family that saw me as nothing but a convenience, an ATM, a free babysitter, a joke. I cried for Thomas, who would have been furious if he'd heard Yara's toast. I cried for myself, for allowing this treatment for so long. When the tears finally stopped, I went to my bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My makeup was ruined, my eyes puffy, but something else was different. There was a clarity in my gaze that hadn't been there before. "Enough," I whispered to my reflection. "Enough." That night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I made a decision. My life wasn't over, it was just beginning, and it would be on my terms. The next morning, I called my bank and made an appointment. Then I called my lawyer. And finally, I pulled out the travel brochure for the Mediterranean cruise I'd been secretly dreaming about since Thomas died. For the first time in years, I felt something like hope, like freedom. They thought I was just a memory waiting to happen. I'd show them how wrong they were. Monday morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The humiliation of my birthday dinner had crystallized into something harder, more determined. I dressed carefully in my best pantsuit, the one I'd worn to Thomas's funeral and hadn't worn since. Today felt equally momentous. My first stop was Hamilton Trust Bank, where manager Jim Peterson had known Thomas and me for over 30 years. His eyebrows shot up when I told him what I wanted to do. "That's a substantial liquidation, Viola," he said, leaning forward across his desk. "Are you sure about this? These investments have been performing well." "I'm certain, Jim." My voice didn't waver. "I'd like to close all accounts except my checking account, which I'll keep open with $10,000. He removed his glasses, polishing them nervously. "May I ask why? Is everything all right?" I thought about Yara's toast, about the laughter that followed, about 5 years of Sunday lunches where my opinions were dismissed, where I was treated like an obligation rather than family. "Everything is finally going to be all right," I replied. Jim nodded slowly. "It will take a few days to liquidate everything properly. The CDs will have some penalties for early withdrawal." "I understand. I'll pay the penalties." 2 hours later, I left with the paperwork started. $8 million, the result of Thomas's life insurance, our investments, and the sale of our manufacturing business when he got sick, would soon be entirely under my control. My next stop was Gerald Webb's law office. Jerry had been Thomas's college roommate and our family lawyer for decades. His secretary, Martha, hugged me when I arrived. "Viola, so good to see you. How was the birthday?" "Illuminating," I said simply. Jerry welcomed me with a warm handshake. At 75, he was still sharp as a tack, his bow tie as perfectly centered as always. "What can I do for you today?" he asked once we were seated in his office. "I need to change my will, Jerry." His expression remained neutral. "I see. Any particular reason?" I took a deep breath. "I'm liquidating my assets and making some life changes. Michael and his family will no longer be my primary beneficiaries." For a moment, silence hung between us. Then Jerry leaned back in his chair. "Viola, we've known each other a long time. This seems sudden." "It isn't," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "It's been coming for 5 years since Thomas died. Maybe longer." I told him about the birthday dinner, about Yara's toast, about the years of subtle disrespect. As I spoke, his expression darkened. "Thomas would be livid," he said finally. "Yes, he would. I smiled sadly. But Thomas isn't here. I am. And I'm finally taking control of what's left of my life. When I left Jerry's office, the afternoon sun was warm on my face. I walked to the small cafe on the corner, the one where Thomas and I used to have Sunday brunch. I ordered a cappuccino and sat by the window, watching people pass by. For the first time in years, I felt myself breathing deeply, freely. My phone buzzed. Michael. I let it go to voicemail. A text followed. Mom, don't forget Tyler needs a ride to practice today. Yara has her charity luncheon. I stared at the message. No. Please. No. How are you doing after your birthday? Just another demand disguised as a reminder. 5 years of this. 5 years of being their on-call chauffeur, cook, ATM, and occasional babysitter, all while being treated like an inconvenience. 5 years of watching Michael become more like Yara, entitled, dismissive, materialistic. I put the phone away without responding. Another text came through, then another. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my tablet and navigated to the Mediterranean cruise I'd been eyeing. 15 days sailing from Barcelona to Athens, with stops in France, Italy, and the Greek islands. I'd dreamed of seeing the Mediterranean since I was a girl, but Thomas's health had always been too fragile for such a long trip. My finger hovered over the Book Now button. Was I really going to do this? Leave everything behind? The house where I'd raised my son, the community I'd been part of for decades. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Yara this time. Viola, Michael said you're not answering. We really need you to get Tyler today. I can't miss this luncheon. It's for charity, you know. Call me back immediately. The imperious tone decided. It for me. I clicked Book Now and went through the reservation process, selecting a balcony suite. Single occupancy. When the confirmation came through, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. I'd never traveled alone before. I'd never made such a big decision without consulting someone else. First my parents, then Thomas, then Michael. On my way home, I stopped at Barnes & Noble and bought 3 travel guides to the Mediterranean, a journal, and a book titled Solo Travel After 60. The young cashier smiled at me. Planning a big trip? She asked. The biggest, I replied, returning her smile. At home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Thomas's old armchair. We'd bought it the year Michael was born, and Thomas had spent countless evenings in it, reading to our son while I watched from the doorway, heart full. Am I doing the right thing, Tom? I whispered to the empty room. As if in answer, my gaze fell on a framed photo on the mantel, Thomas and me on our 40th anniversary, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. We'd renewed our vows that day, promising again to cherish each other until death parted us. But we'd never imagined the kind of death that was coming for our family. The slow erosion of respect, the gradual disappearance of love, until all that remained was obligation and convenience. The phone rang again. Michael. This time I answered. Mom, where have you been? Tyler needs... I can't today, Michael, I interrupted. I'm busy. Silence on the other end. I'd never refused him before. Busy, he finally managed. With what? My life, I said simply, and hung up. Then I pulled out my new journal and began to plan the rest of my life. A life that, for the first time in decades, would be entirely my own. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. I sold my car to a young couple expecting their first child. I hired a property manager to handle the sale of my house, the beautiful colonial that had been my home for 40 years. I donated most of my clothes to the women's shelter downtown, keeping only what I would need for the cruise and whatever life awaited me afterward. Each action felt both terrifying and liberating, like cutting away anchors I hadn't realized were holding me down. Michael called repeatedly. I answered only. once telling him I was making some changes but offering no details. His reaction was predictable: confusion, then irritation, then demands for explanations I wasn't ready to give. "Mom, you're not making sense," he'd said, his voice sharp with impatience. "What changes? Why now?" "I'll explain everything when I'm ready," I replied. "For now, I need some space." "Space?" He sounded genuinely bewildered. From what? I almost laughed. From being taken for granted. From being the convenient solution to everyone's problems while my own needs were ignored. From the slow suffocation of living as an afterthought in my own family. But I simply said, "I'll be in touch," and ended the call. The morning of my departure arrived crisp and clear. My suitcases, brand new, purchased for this journey, waited by the door. My passport, updated after Thomas died but never used, sat in my purse alongside my wallet, now containing a significant amount of cash and a new credit card linked to my personal account. I took one last walk through the house, touching familiar surfaces, saying goodbye to the home where I'd raised my son, loved my husband, and eventually lost myself. In the master bedroom, I paused at Thomas's side of the bed, still preserved as if he might return any moment. "I hope you understand," I whispered to his memory. "I need to find myself again." The taxi arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. At the airport, I checked my luggage with hands that trembled slightly. I was really doing this, flying to Barcelona alone, at 70 years old, to board a cruise ship bound for adventure. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. While waiting at the gate, my phone buzzed with a text from Yara. "Viola, Michael says you're acting strange. Remember, we need you for Sunday lunch. Tyler has a game after." I turned off my phone. Without responding, the flight to Barcelona was long but surprisingly pleasant. I watched 2 movies, ate the airline meal without complaint, and even managed to sleep for a few hours. When we began our descent over the Mediterranean coast, the sight of the sun glinting off the azure water brought tears to my eyes. Here. I had made it. The cruise terminal was bustling with activity. I followed the signs for the Celestial Voyager, my heart beating faster with each step. The ship was magnificent, gleaming white against the blue sky, flags fluttering in the gentle breeze. I joined the check-in line, clutching my documents. "First cruise?" asked the woman behind me, her American accent comfortingly familiar. I turned to see a slender woman about my age with short silver hair and bright blue eyes. Her smile was warm and knowing. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, returning her smile. "You have that look of terrified excitement," she said with a laugh. "I remember it well from my first solo trip." "Solo trip," I repeated, testing the phrase. "Yes, I suppose that's what this is." "I'm Agatha," she said, extending her hand. "Agatha Reynolds." "Viola Harrington," I replied, shaking her hand. "Pleased to meet you." "Well, Viola Harrington," she said, her eyes twinkling. "How about we have dinner together tonight? First nights can be intimidating when you're alone." I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd like that very much." After check-in, I found my stateroom on deck 8. The balcony suite was more luxurious than I'd imagined, a queen-sized bed with fine linens, a sitting area with a small sofa, and a private balcony overlooking the sea. I unpacked methodically, hanging my clothes in the closet, arranging my toiletries in the bathroom. As I worked, my phone buzzed from the depths of my purse. I had turned it back on after landing, out of some lingering sense of responsibility. Now I retrieved it to find 6 missed calls and a dozen texts, all from Michael or Yara. The latest was from Michael. "Mom, where are you? The house is empty and your car is gone. Call me immediately." I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. They had gone to the house, probably expecting to find me there, ready to drive Tyler to his game or prepare Sunday lunch. Instead, they'd found emptiness. Now they were panicking, not out of concern for me, but because their carefully arranged lives had been disrupted. A pang of guilt shot through me. Was I being selfish? Abandoning my family without explanation? What kind of mother does that? But then I remembered Yara's toast, the cruel laughter, the years of being taken for granted. I remembered Michael's impatience whenever I expressed a need or desire of my own. I remembered how they had already dismissed me as heading for a nursing home. Soon just a memory. With steady fingers, I typed a brief message. I'm safe, taking some time for myself. We'll be in touch when I'm ready. I hesitated, then added, Please respect my need for space. Then I silenced the phone and placed it in the room safe. I wouldn't turn it off completely, that felt too final. But I wouldn't let it intrude on this journey either. A knock at my door startled me. I opened it to find Agatha, now dressed in white linen pants and a turquoise blouse. Ready for the sail-away party? She asked, her enthusiasm infectious. There's champagne on the top deck, and we get to watch Barcelona disappear as we head out to sea. I smoothed my hands over my own outfit, a new pale blue dress I'd bought specifically for this trip. Ready, I said, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. As the ship pulled away from the dock, I stood at the railing beside Agatha, champagne flute in hand. The Barcelona skyline slowly receded, the famous Sagrada Familia visible in the distance. Fellow passengers cheered and took photos, but I simply breathed in the sea air and felt the gentle vibration of the ship beneath my feet. To new beginnings, Agatha said, raising her glass. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. The shore grew smaller, then disappeared altogether, leaving nothing but endless blue horizon. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of expectations lift from my shoulders. I was free. By the 5th day of the cruise, I had settled into a rhythm that felt both novel and strangely natural. Each morning, I woke early to watch the sunrise from my balcony, wrapped in the plush robe provided by the cruise line. I'd have coffee delivered to my room, then join Agatha for breakfast in the main dining room. Agatha Reynolds had become my unexpected guide to this new world of independence. A widow for 12 years, she had transformed her grief into a passion for exploration. After her husband's death, she'd sold their large suburban home, invested wisely, and now spent half the year traveling. The hardest part, she told me over breakfast as we sailed toward Naples, was convincing my children that I wasn't having a breakdown. They thought grief had made me irrational. I laughed, recognizing the familiar concern disguised as control. What changed their minds? Time, she said, buttering her toast with precision. And the realization that I wasn't asking their permission. I was simply informing them of my decisions. After breakfast, I'd attend an art class or a lecture, then lunch, followed by exploration whenever we docked at a new port. In the evenings, Agatha and I would dress for dinner, sharing a table with other passengers who gradually became friends. A retired professor from Boston, a widowed doctor from Chicago, a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary. For the first time in decades, I was known only as myself, not as Thomas's wife, Michael's mother, or Tyler's grandmother. Just Viola, a woman with her own interests, opinions, and stories to tell, and I was blossoming. In Marseille, I discovered a passion for photography, capturing the vibrant colors of the old port with the new camera I'd purchased in Barcelona. In Rome, I stood before Michelangelo's Pietà with tears streaming down my face, moved beyond words by its beauty. You're changing, Agatha observed as we shared a bottle of wine on my balcony that evening, the lights of the Italian coast twinkling. In the distance, I can see it happening day by day. Is that strange? I asked, swirling the ruby liquid in my glass. To change so much at 70? She laughed, a rich sound that carried on the sea breeze. What's strange is thinking we ever stop changing. Life is constant transformation, Viola. The tragedy is when we let others freeze us in place. I thought of Michael and Yara, of how they had gradually reduced me to a single dimension, a convenient resource, always available, never inconvenient. How had I allowed that to happen? The answer came with surprising clarity. I had confused love with usefulness. Somewhere along the way, I'd begun to measure my worth by how much my family needed me, not by how much they respected me. The next morning, as we docked in Naples, I checked my phone for the first time in days. 27 missed calls. Dozens of texts, increasingly frantic. "Mom, where are you? This isn't funny anymore. We've called the police. They're treating this as a missing person case. Please just let us know you're alive." The last one, sent just hours ago, was different. "Mom, it's Michael. I found the letter from the cruise line. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you just disappear?" So they'd finally discovered my destination. The property manager must have forwarded my mail. A heavy weight settled in my stomach. I hadn't meant to cause such alarm. Despite everything, I didn't want Michael to think I was in danger. But I also wasn't ready for the interrogation that would follow if I called. After careful consideration, I sent a brief email. "Michael, I am safe and well on my Mediterranean cruise. I needed time to myself after years of putting everyone else first. I'm sorry for worrying you, but please understand that this journey is important to me. I will contact you when I return to the States. Until then, I ask that you respect my privacy. Love, Mom." I hit send, then turned off my phone again. Naples awaited with its narrow streets and centuries of history. I wouldn't let guilt overshadow this precious day. That afternoon, as Agatha and I explored the ruins of Pompeii, I found myself drawn to the plaster casts of the city's final victims, men, women, and children, frozen in their last moments when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. Their forms were haunting, yet strangely beautiful in their humanity. They had no warning, our guide explained. No time to escape. I stared at the figure of a woman, her arms raised as if to protect herself from the inevitable. How many warnings had I ignored in my own life? How many times had I felt the tremors of discontent, but convinced myself the eruption would never come? "You're thinking about your family," Agatha said quietly as we walked back to the ship. I nodded, surprised by her perception. "I keep wondering if I did the right thing, leaving so abruptly, without explanation." "Would they have listened if you'd tried to explain?" she asked. The question hung between us, unanswerable yet revealing. No, they wouldn't have listened. They would have dismissed my feelings, labeled me oversensitive or dramatic. They would have made promises they had no intention of keeping, all to restore the comfortable status quo. That evening, as the ship sailed toward Greece, I received an unexpected call on my stateroom phone. My heart raced, thinking it might be the ship's staff relaying an emergency message from home. But it was the cruise director, calling to ask if I would consider sharing some of my photographs in the ship's art gallery. Another passenger had seen me taking pictures in port and mentioned my remarkable eye for composition to the staff. "Me?" I asked, genuinely shocked. "But I'm just an amateur." "Sometimes the freshest perspectives come from those who haven't been taught the rules," he replied. 2 days later, 5 of my photographs, printed and framed by the ship's photography center, hung in the gallery alongside works by professional artists. My name on the little placards beside them looked strange, almost like it belonged to someone else. Viola Harrington, United States. As I stood in the gallery during the exhibition opening, glass of champagne in hand, passengers I'd never met approached to compliment my work. They asked about my techniques, my inspiration, my background as a photographer. "I just started, actually," I admitted to a couple from Australia. "This cruise is my first real adventure with a camera." "You've got a natural talent," the woman said. "The way you capture light is quite special." Later, The ship's photographer approached with an offer to buy 2 of my prints for the permanent collection displayed in the main dining room. I was so stunned that Agatha had to nudge me to respond. That night, back in my stateroom, I sat on the balcony watching the moon's reflection dance on the waves. A warm Mediterranean breeze caressed my skin as I contemplated the day's events. Was this woman who took photographs worthy of exhibition? Who accepted compliments without deflection? Who navigated foreign cities with confidence and dined with strangers who quickly became friends? She was me, I realized. She had always been. Me, buried beneath layers of obligation and expectation, and now, like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, I was finally spreading my wings. My phone sat on the bedside table, still turned off. Michael and his family felt distant now, as if they existed in another life, one I had carefully packed, away like winter clothes in summer. Tomorrow we would arrive in Santorini. I had already decided to take a watercolor class offered on the island, to try my hand at capturing the famous blue domes and whitewashed buildings in a new medium. I was no longer just existing. I was living, discovering, becoming. And I had no intention of going back to the woman I was before. Chapter 5. The return on her own terms. The Mediterranean cruise that was supposed to last 15 days stretched into 30, then 45. When we reached Athens, the final destination on the original itinerary, Agatha convinced me to join her on the ship's continuing journey to Istanbul and the Black Sea. "Why rush back?" she asked, as we sipped ouzo in a small taverna overlooking the Acropolis. "What's waiting for you that can't wait a little longer?" I couldn't think of a single reason to say no. Those extra weeks were a gift I gave myself without guilt. I explored ancient ruins in Ephesus, wandered through the Grand Bazaar in Istanbul, and watched the sun rise over the Black Sea from the ship's deck. I continued taking photographs, now with growing confidence, and even sold 3 prints to fellow passengers. But eventually, the extended journey came to an end. As the ship docked in Barcelona once more, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and resolve. I wasn't the same woman who had boarded this ship nearly 2 months ago. "What will you do now?" Agatha asked as we exchanged contact information. She was continuing on to a photography retreat in Provence, an invitation she'd extended to me as well. "I need to go home," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Not to stay, but to settle things properly." She nodded, understanding what I couldn't fully articulate. Running away had been necessary, a radical act of self-preservation. But true freedom would come only when I could face my family on my own terms, without fear or guilt. The flight back to the States gave me time to prepare. I reviewed my finances on my tablet. The proceeds from the house sale had been finalized. While I was at sea, adding to my considerable nest egg, I had already purchased a small condominium in a vibrant downtown area, sight unseen except for virtual tours. It was modern, manageable, and most importantly, mine alone. When I turned on my phone after landing, it exploded with notifications. I scrolled through them quickly, noting the progression from anger to concern, to a strange, sullen acceptance in Michael's messages. The most recent, sent just 2 days ago, was uncharacteristically reflective. "Mom, I don't understand why you left the way you did, but I hope you're finding whatever you're looking for. We miss you. Tyler keeps asking about you. Please come home." Home. The word rang hollow now. My house was sold, my possessions either stored or donated. Home was no longer a place but a feeling, the feeling of being true to myself. I checked into a hotel rather than calling Michael immediately. I needed one more night of independence, one more morning of waking up answering to no one but myself. The next day, I rented a car and drove to Michael and Yara's sprawling suburban house. The familiar route felt strange now, as if I were navigating someone else's memory. When I pulled into their driveway, I sat for a moment, gathering my courage. The door opened before I could knock. Michael stood there, his expression a complex mixture of relief and wariness. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You're back." "I'm back," I confirmed, stepping inside when he moved aside. The house was exactly as I remembered, tastefully decorated in the neutral tones Yara preferred. Immaculate to the point of feeling unlived in. Tyler sat at the kitchen counter, his eyes widening when he saw me. "Grandma!" he exclaimed, showing more enthusiasm than he had in years. "You look different." I smiled, touching my hair, now styled, in a shorter, more modern cut than the conservative style I'd worn for decades. My clothes, too, were different. A coral blouse and white pants purchased in Santorini, with a turquoise necklace made by an artisan in Istanbul. "Where's Yara?" I asked, noticing her absence. "Pilates," Michael replied, studying me as if I were a puzzle he couldn't solve. "She'll be back soon." "Mom, what happened? Why did you just disappear like that?" I set my purse down and took a seat at the kitchen island. "I needed to find myself again," he frowned. "Find yourself? Mom, you're 70, not 17. The old me would have flinched at his dismissive tone. The new me simply smiled. "That's exactly the problem, Michael. Somehow, we've all bought into the idea that after a certain age, women should just fade, become convenient, stop having dreams or needs of our own." Tyler, surprisingly, nodded. "Like in that toast at your birthday. That was cold." Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was just Yara's sense of humor. She didn't mean anything by it." "She meant exactly what she said," I replied calmly. "And so did all of you when you laughed." The front door opened, and Yara's voice called out, "Michael? Whose car is in the driveway?" She appeared in the kitchen doorway, yoga mat under her arm, her expression freezing when she saw me. "Viola," she said, recovering quickly. "You're back from your adventure." The way she said adventure made it sound like a childish escapade, something embarrassing and best forgotten. 6 months ago, I would have accepted that framing, eager to smooth things over and reclaim my place in the family. Not anymore. "I'm back," I confirmed, "but not staying." Michael's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "I've sold the house," I said. "I've bought a condominium downtown. I'm moving in next week." "Downtown?" Yara echoed, aghast. "But that's so far from us. How will you help with Tyler's schedule or Sunday lunches?" There it was, the assumption that my primary value lay in my usefulness to them. Not my company, not my wisdom, not my love, just my availability. "I won't be driving Tyler anymore," I said gently, "and I won't be hosting Sunday lunches. I'll be happy to meet you at restaurants, though, perhaps once a month." Michael stared as if I'd started speaking in tongues. "Mom, what are you saying? What about family? What about us?" "I'm saying I love you," I replied, meaning it despite everything. "But I also love myself now, and I won't go back to being treated like a convenience rather than a person." "This is ridiculous," Yara snapped, her composure cracking. "You can't just change the rules after all this time. We depend on you." "That's the problem," I said, meeting her gaze steadily. "You depend on me, but you don't respect me." The silence that followed was heavy with truth. Tyler, showing wisdom beyond his 16 years, finally broke it. "Grandma's right," he said quietly. "We've been taking her for granted." Yara shot him a look that would have withered flowers. Michael just looked lost, like a man who had woken, up to find the ground beneath his feet had shifted overnight. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I assured them, my voice softening. "I'm just changing the terms of my participation. I want a relationship based on mutual respect, not obligation." "And if we don't agree to your terms?" Yara challenged. I picked up my purse and stood, feeling strangely peaceful despite the tension crackling in the air. "Then that will be your choice," I said, "just as this is mine." I left them sitting in their perfect kitchen, surrounded by all, the trappings of the life they thought I should want to serve. As I drove away, I felt not regret but resolution. The woman who had allowed herself to be diminished was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, clearer, and finally, genuinely free. 1 year passed more quickly than I could have imagined. My downtown condominium became a true home, filled with photographs from my travels and artwork purchased from local galleries. I enrolled in photography classes at the community college, joined a book club, and volunteered teaching English to new immigrants. All things I'd wanted to do for years, but had set aside for family obligations. I met with Michael and Tyler for dinner once a month, sometimes with Yara, sometimes without. Our relationship remained strained but civil. Michael struggled to understand my transformation, vacillating between grudging respect and frustrated incomprehension. Tyler surprisingly became my strongest ally, often visiting me downtown to escape the suffocating perfection of his parents' home. "I like it here," he told me one afternoon as we sat on my balcony overlooking the city park. "It feels real." Yara remained coldly polite on the rare occasions we met, her smile never reaching her eyes. I knew she viewed my change as a personal betrayal, a rejection of the careful hierarchy she had established with herself at the top. As my 71st birthday approached, I decided to host a small celebration in my new home. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to mark the occasion surrounded by the authentic connections I'd cultivated over the past year. "You should invite Michael and his family," Agatha suggested during our weekly video call. After returning from Europe, she had moved to Santa Fe to pursue her photography, but we remained close friends. "Even Yara?" I asked, only half joking. "Especially Yara," Agatha replied. "Show her what grace looks like." So I sent the invitations, one to Michael, Yara, and Tyler, and others to my new friends, my photography instructor Sandra, my neighbors David and Ruth, and several members of my book club. The day of the party arrived warm and clear. I prepared simple but elegant hors d'oeuvres, set out wine and sparkling water, and arranged fresh flowers in the vases I'd brought back from Greece. My home looked beautiful, a reflection of the woman I had become. Sandra and the book club members arrived first, bearing gifts and warm hugs. David and Ruth followed with a bottle of champagne. We were chatting comfortably when the doorbell rang again. Michael stood there, Tyler beside him. "No Yara." "Happy birthday, Mom," Michael said, kissing my cheek. "Yara sends her regrets. She has a charity committee meeting." The old me would have been hurt by her absence. The new me simply nodded, unsurprised. "Come in. There are people I'd like you to meet." As I introduced my son and grandson to my friends, I watched Michael's face carefully. He seemed genuinely shocked by this glimpse into my new life. These interesting, accomplished people who valued my company, who knew me as Viola the photographer, Viola the avid reader, Viola the traveler. Not as Michael's mother or Tyler's grandmother, but as myself. Tyler integrated easily, engaging David in a conversation about architecture, his newest interest. Michael lingered at the edges, a stranger in this world I had created without him. After everyone had arrived, Sandra called for attention. "I have an announcement," she said, smiling at me. "Our very own Viola has been selected for the Community Art Center's Emerging Photographers exhibition next month. 3 of her Mediterranean series will be featured." My friends applauded enthusiastically. Michael's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. "You're a photographer now?" he asked when the conversation had resumed around us. "I'm many things," I replied. "Photography is just one of them." He studied me with new eyes. "You've really changed, Mom." "I've really become myself," I corrected gently. The evening progressed pleasantly. We shared stories, laughed, and eventually gathered around the dining table for cake. As Sandra brought it out, a beautiful confection from my favorite bakery, I noticed Michael checking his phone repeatedly. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yara wants to know when we'll be home. She finished her meeting early." Ah, there it was. The summons, the expectation that he would drop everything at her. Convenience. How familiar it felt, watching from the outside now. "You should invite her to join us," I suggested, surprising myself with my own sincerity. "There's plenty of cake." Michael looked doubtful, but sent the text. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. Yara stood there, impeccably dressed as always, a small gift bag dangling from her fingers. "Happy birthday, Viola," she said, her smile practiced. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, ushering her in. "We're just about to have cake." As we gathered around the table, my friends raising their glasses in birthday toasts, both heartfelt and humorous, I watched Yara taking in the scene. Her eyes darted from the tasteful decor to my relaxed, happy guests, lingering on the framed photographs that now lined my walls, tangible evidence of my new identity. When everyone had been served cake, I stood to offer my own toast. "Thank you all for being here," I said, looking around at the circle of faces, some new, some familiar, all dear to me in different ways. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here, in my own home, surrounded by such wonderful people. I've learned that it's never too late to discover who you really are. My friends raised their glasses with murmurs of agreement. Even Michael smiled, though something wistful flickered in his eyes. Only Yara remained stone-faced, her glass barely lifted. After cake, as conversations formed and reformed around the room, Yara approached me near the kitchen. "So, this is your new life," she said, gesturing vaguely at the apartment. "All alone." "I'm not alone," I corrected her. "I'm independent." "There's a difference." She gave a small, dismissive laugh. "At your age, isn't it the same thing?" The comment was so similar to her cruel birthday toast a year ago, yet now it held no power to wound me. "No, Yara," I said calmly. "Being alone is what I felt sitting at my own birthday dinner while my family laughed at the idea of me being just a memory. This," I gestured to my home, my friends, my photographs. "This is being complete." Her smile faltered, uncertainty flickering across her perfect features. I continued, my voice gentle but firm. "A year ago, you thought I was finished, ready for the shelf or the nursing home. But look around, Yara. I'm just getting started." Before she could respond, Tyler bounded over, excitement lighting his face. "Grandma, David says you might be able to photograph his daughter's wedding next spring. Is that true?" I smiled at my grandson, now taller than me and showing signs of the thoughtful man he might become. "Yes, we've been discussing it. David's been very supportive of my work." Yara's eyes widened. "You're doing professional photography now?" "Semi-professional," I clarified. "I'm still learning, but yes, I've been paid for my work." Something shifted in her expression, a reluctant reassessment. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing me as a person in my own right, not just an extension of her husband's family or a convenient resource. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Michael approached me with a hesitant smile. "This was nice, Mom. Different, but nice." He paused, then added awkwardly, "I'm proud of you." The words warmed me, though I no longer needed his approval the way I once had. "Thank you, Michael. That means a lot." After everyone had gone, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights, a glass of champagne in hand. The night air was cool against my skin, carrying the promise of autumn. I thought about the journey of the past year, from the humiliation of that birthday dinner to the quiet triumph of tonight's celebration, from invisibility to recognition, from obligation to choice. Yara's toast had been cruelly accurate in one sense. The woman I was then truly had become just a memory. But in her place stood someone stronger. Someone who had refused to be diminished by others' limited expectations. I raised my glass to the night sky, to the stars that had guided sailors for millennia, to the vast universe that held endless possibilities, even at 71. To the last laugh, I whispered and drank deeply. My story wasn't ending. It was just beginning to be told in my own voice, finally loud enough to hear. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.